The only coach that I didn't tell that I was going to his school was Joe Paterno. I told him, forget it, I ain't going to Penn State, everybody goes there. I told every other coach, sign me up, coach, I'm coming. I told Woody, I told Bo, I told everybody. And then, of course, when it all came down to it, my dad, I was 17 at the time, my dad wouldn't sign the papers. I had actually signed to go to Colorado. And Pop wouldn't sign the papers, and I ended up at Penn State. So now here's this bug-eyed guy who I just told, take a hike, I ain't coming. I was brutal. Because he came down to recruit me, and they had this little dinner in Allentown. And Joe was in there, and he gave this speech about how Penn State does everything right. And in the middle of the speech, I knew I wasn't going to Penn State. So I stood up and I said, does that mean I'm not getting the car you promised me? And the whole place burst out laughing. And I thought, I'll never see that guy again, forget it. Ugh. It was the start of a beautiful relationship. See, when I went to Penn State, Joe thought he was in control, but I knew that I was. So we had a little bit of difference of opinion. And so what happened was, it was my freshman year, they just put me on the first team. It was about maybe the third week of the season, and I got into a fight with a bunch of guys, I don't know who it was. And so Joe throws me off the field, as was this company. You know, I don't know if you people are familiar, when Joe gets mad, his voice gets real high. And he said, Millen, get out of here. I'm sick of your prima donna ways. I'm like, what the heck's a prima donna? So he throws me off the field, and I say, no, I'm not going. And he doesn't know what to do. And he says, I said, get out of here. I said, I heard what you said, and I'm not going anywhere. I came here to play football, and I'm playing football. He didn't know what to do. You know what he did? He said, fine, stay there. And he moved the whole practice over, and I stood in the middle of the field like the cheese stands alone. I'm just standing there. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. And so after practice, and I went in, I'm sorry, coach, I won't do that again. And that pattern went on for a little bit. And then in the middle of the season, funny thing happened to me. I met a guy, they kept on telling me to stay away from this one group of guys because they were these Christian guys. They said, stay away from these guys, these Jesus freak type of guys. So you gotta tell me, if you tell me to stay away from something, forget it. You know I'm gonna be there. So there was one guy in particular, and it was Doug Hostetler. Now the Hostetler boys are from Holsopple, right up the road here. And of course Jeff played for a long time. Played for the Giants, played for the Raiders. Ronnie played with him, and Doug also. And so I started talking to Dougie, and Doug was just a regular guy who was actually had things pretty well together. Now, growing up Catholic, you know, I did everything right according to the Catholic traditions, and but there was one thing that I had. There was one thing inside that never left me, and that was that the Word of God was the truth. And that's something that's always stuck with me. And that's something that I believe all the time, always have and always will. I think, and let's take faith out of it for a second. You have to stand for something. There has to be something that you can stand on. For me, it's always been truth. Because if you don't have truth, you're nothing. That's my own personal opinion. And here's what I found out. It's an amazing thing. Once you know the truth, now you have to do something with it. So what are you going to do? So I made a decision. I made a decision in 1976. It was halfway through my freshman year that I was going to be a believer of Christ. And let me tell you something. That's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The hardest, by far, not even close. And so, is that a happy ending? Are you kidding me? And I was just beginning to screw things up. You have no idea. But it's a process, and it started, and I've been going through the process, and I'll continue to go through the process. And so, made a lot of good decisions, made a lot of bad decisions, but learned a ton, and continue to learn. In the course of all that, Joe Paterno saw this kid come in who was kind of a wild kid, and there was a transformation that started to happen, and Joe didn't believe it. Because there's a couple times, you know, I'd still fall off the wagon every now and then, go beat somebody up, and then I'd get called in his office, and he'd tell me what's wrong with me. One more time, Millen, and that's the end. And of course, that one more time came, and when I had us do these half-mile tests or whatever those things were, what were they? Half-mile tests? I don't know if you people know this stuff, but it was going into my senior year, and we're getting ready, and I always thought that stuff was stupid. I always thought, let's train, and let's practice football, and let's condition for football. If we're going to go out for the track team, let's run half-mile tests, but we're not running half-mile tests or mile and a half when Tommy was there and Ronnie was there. Well, who cares about that stuff? I'm not running long distance. So we run the first half mile, and I run it, and I mean, my back is tightened up like a block. And so we start running the second half mile, and I just stop, and I turn, and I look over at Joe, and he's screaming at me, Millen, get going, Millen, what are you doing? And I said, if I have to chase a guy for a half a mile, he's going to score. Joe didn't quite see the humor in that remark. Kicked me off the team. I was off the team for about maybe 3 or 4 days. I can't remember anymore. And then he made me come back, and I came back, and I had to run the tests over anyway, and then finally got back on, and then he put me on the foreign team. For those of you who don't know what the foreign team is, that's like Scrubville. That's you come in as a freshman or whatever, and you play against the first team. Well, no, my junior year, I was an All-American, and we had a little bit of success up there. And so Joe puts me on the foreign team with these freshmen, and I have to go against our first team offensive line, which was great for me, because I knew they couldn't block me. So that lasted for about 2 practices. And Joe said, get him out of there, he's screwing the whole thing up. So then he put me on a safe place. He put me on the third team, and I had to alternate with some other kid. I don't even know who it was. And then finally, of course, when push came to shove and it was time to go regular season, he put me back up in the first team, and I promptly got hurt 2 games later, and that was the end of my senior year. But the one thing that happened was Joe did actually see a difference. There are a lot of programs out there, and there are some guys who are trying to do it right. But that guy, and he's got his faults, trust me. He's got a lot of faults. But he runs as good a program as there is in all of football, and has for 40 years. He's tried to do it right. He's tried to accentuate the academics. He's tried to have his players have a full experience up there. And so you're well-rounded. He points things out. I thought that what Joe Paterno did, I argued with him a bunch, and I disagreed with him. But he's trying to do it. He tried to do it the right way, and he still does to this day. The guy's 83 years old. I had a chance to sit with him and watch his practices, watch how he's running. Not much has changed. He's gotten a little softer. I mean, he actually likes his players now, but he's. It's been fun to watch. When you look at and go back through history and look at who are the greatest, forget coaches, but who influenced their players throughout college football history, there are very few. There are a lot of guys who won a lot of games, but there are very few who influenced them. But at the top of the list, Eddie Robinson down to Grambling, he had a great effect on his players. Joe Paterno's at the top of that list. And so, you know, everybody has their way of doing it, but his way's pretty darn good. And he's had players for forever. And a lot of them probably still don't agree with some of the things that happened, how they went through it. Everybody's experience is different. But when you look at how he ran the program, it's as good as there is.